few weeks ago, I saw Beetlejuice, a sequel to Beetlejuice, which was a fun, dark comedy made over 30 years ago by Tim Burton, starring Gina Davis, Alec Baldwin, and Michael Keaton. I'll just start off by saying I was very skeptical of this movie. In a year with unnecessary sequels, remakes, reimaginings, whatever you want to call them, could you blame me? But I'm glad to be proven wrong here. This was definitely a fun movie to watch. It was, however, all over the place with different storylines, so I had some problems with it, but I really enjoyed it. The original Beetlejuice music is iconic. You could tell the sequel had updated it and it was still recognizable. Danny Elfman didn't go overboard with changing it or making it too different in my opinion. Just like in the original, they jump right into the movie within like 5 to 10 minutes. No need for long setups for where everyone has been and all that. Also something really small, but I'm so happy they kept the miniatures in there. It was also interesting to see more of the Afterlife Society. This movie kept in the spirit of the first, which is really one major thing that I think many sequels miss the mark on. So many sequels don't keep that atmosphere. They don't feel authentic. Let's be honest, they mostly feel like not so well thought out cash grabs. It's essential to keep in the spirit of any first film if you're going to do a sequel, and I think Tim Burton succeeded in that. And I can only think of a very small handful of sequels that worked for me throughout the years. Just don't veer off too much from the original. You know, the one that made it successful or even possible. You get what I mean. If you're going to reference things from a previous movie, it needs to make sense within that world or at least seem as organic as possible. A sequel should complement the original. A lot of sequels just feel off and too different. I think they incorporated most things here fine. I mean, the daughter riding through the town and us seeing all the memorable places, like we get it. We know where you are. But I appreciated the fact that we didn't stay there. It wasn't out of nowhere. There's a reason to show it as she ventured off, and they didn't linger too much on it. We got to see more of that town, streets we never saw. It's not like she stopped at the well-known general store, now a coffee shop, no surprise. We stopped at a street where people were living. The first one was dark, it felt more raw. The sequel, on the other hand, did feel a little more flashy and silly, like modern Burton in my opinion. Lighter, more colorful, but I still think it married well with old Tim Burton and modern Burton. I'm more of a fan of Burton's older films, maybe up to 2000, give or take a few years, but not really a fan of his more recent stuff, honestly. Mid-2000s, my interest started to fade. I just didn't care for the change that I saw in his films. This for sure had both. I appreciate the use of animatronics with some CGI. I was worried about the overuse of it, but it worked well here. There was a good mixture. The sandworm portion was very CGI, but they at least tried to retain the clay textures. The stop animation showing Charles in his little accident as claymation was strange at first. However, given the situation with the actor, it makes sense to show the scene in a different way. I found it interesting that they still found a way to use Charles without having to use the actor. It gives a good opportunity to show off an artist's claymation abilities, but also resolves the issue of not being able to use an actor. For those of us that grew up with a lot of claymation being used, like Celebrity Deathmatch, Mad TV segments, and of course, Nightmare Before Christmas, it was a nice callback to that art form. Now for the acting and characters. The acting was pretty great from everyone. Michael Keaton still got it, of course. I will say though, he wasn't as animated as he was in the first one, but it was fine in the end. It's always put into question if the actor still has it, you know? To resurrect a character after 20, 40 years, it can feel concerning, but Michael Keaton pulls it off. They are older, and it shows, but it could still work. Winona Ryder was still Lydia. She also successfully pulled that off. Although I will say, there was something a little off-putting about seeing Lydia, after all these years, still having the same hairstyle. We get it, it was iconic, but we know who she is. We know she is Lydia from the first one. She just never changed her hairstyle after 40 years. I got used to it after a while. I mean, you kind of have to deal with it as the movie went on, but at first it was so odd to me. This hair is for the people that have seen the previous movie. The same hairstyle after almost 40 years. Why? Anyway, Katherine O'Hara was great. I fully believe this is the person she always was, a pretentious artist, putting her stuff everywhere, cashing in on her experience, even if it kills her. The notoriety, riches, her expression, and status always mattered to her. However, it was really nice to see some character development between the two. Character development? Chemistry? What's that? Sorry, I couldn't help but take a jab at Joker 2. Anyway, we get a conversation between Lydia and Delia regarding their relationship and how it's grown throughout the years, despite some rough beginnings. It was a great moment they shared for Delia to help Lydia with her issues and her daughter. It wasn't forced, and them dealing with similar issues, Delia could give her advice. Willem Dafoe, of course, amazing. He's having fun. I enjoyed how he kept up the persona of a detective, as if he never wanted to keep that up, but maybe he felt like he had to. He goes full method actor, even in death. He definitely reminded me of his Boondock Saints character. Okay, so a few criticisms. So many storylines. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate that this movie was a nice hour and 40 plus minutes. Although the wedding song and dance scene seemed a little too long, but fine. I don't recall any musical numbers in the first one being that long. And Beluchi's character. Beautiful. Gorgeous. I liked the idea of her, but was she really necessary? In fact, was the whole ex-wife and cop storyline necessary? There seemed to be a lot of stuff shoved into this movie. We had so many storylines and dynamics. Lydia with her daughter, Lydia with Beetlejuice, Delia with her grieving artwork, Astrid with the ghost kid, Beetlejuice's ex-wife, Dead Cop trying to find ex-wife and Beetlejuice, Charles's journey not realizing he is dead, Lydia and daughter dealing with dead husband, which, by the way, I don't recall them explaining why she couldn't see the husband, other than it doesn't work like that. I'm not sure if I missed anything, but it was a lot. The ex-dead wife, Beluchi, I loved how she looked, but she didn't seem as important as I thought she would be. She definitely got the initial storyline going, but I don't think it was needed. The death of Charles seemed like the way into Lydia's life again, for Beetlejuice. That was his ticket back in. The ex-wife was just a side story. It did give us some backstory to Beetlejuice, but why? Okay, I get it. One more thing. It's not a big deal, but it was just weird to me that when mentioning Adam and Barbara, Lydia just says something like, she didn't know exactly, but they somehow found a way to move on. They could have just stuck with that or just said they crossed over. Isn't that a term used a lot for afterlife things? It's as if they made it a question as to why they weren't around anymore, but I'm sure most viewers would just accept they crossed over after all these years. I don't know, small nitpick. The movie had a lot of references, or it more so reminded me of other movies. Not sure if it was intentional though. For example, Casper for the Ghost Boy. The Soul Train reminded me of The Wiz. Beetlejuice blowing up like Violet Beauregard. Tim Burton version, of course. Beluchi was like Corpse Bride or Sally. Lydia's monetization of the ghosts and all that got me thinking about The Frighteners too. So, with all that said, I really enjoyed this. Sometimes it's good to be wrong. I wasn't too excited about this coming out, and the looks of it made me weary, but I was pleasantly surprised. I think I'd watch it again. But as I've said, this is the Tim Burton of now, not 1988, so take that as you will. I haven't looked into it much, but it seemed successful. Hope you enjoyed my review of Beetlejuice. Let me know your thoughts on it, and I'll see you for the next one.